Did you know that over a century after his infamous reign of terror, new evidence may finally reveal Jack the Ripper's true identity? One of the most brutal killers in human history, a shadow who stalked the dark alleys of Victorian London, may finally have a name. Thanks to preserved DNA, forensic technology, and a single, overlooked clue buried deep in the archives, we may be on the verge of solving the mystery that has baffled the world for over 135 years. Today, we're diving into the chilling and twisted mystery of Jack the Ripper, a true crime story that has haunted generations and become the gold standard of unsolved murder cases. This is more than a legend. This is a historical enigma steeped in horror, speculation, and now, scientific revelation. We'll peel back the layers of Victorian England, step into the gaslit streets of Whitechapel, and walk through the blood-soaked trail of bodies left behind by a killer who was never caught. But in this episode, we're also going to reveal the latest DNA evidence and a suspect that could change everything we thought we knew about the Ripper. For decades, the identity of Jack the Ripper has been shrouded in myth, rumor, and fear. Despite countless investigations, hundreds of suspects, and modern forensic efforts, no one has ever been officially named. The Ripper was a phantom, always one step ahead of the authorities, always hidden in the fog. What if I told you that a simple piece of fabric and a smear of DNA could finally blow this case wide open? What if the answers have been in front of us all along, misfiled, misread, and misunderstood? In this video, we'll examine the crime scenes, the suspects, and the most recent breakthroughs in DNA analysis that may finally shine light on history's darkest figure. It all began in London, 1888. The city was booming, but the East End was another world entirely. Whitechapel was grimy, overcrowded, and plagued with poverty, prostitution, and disease. The Industrial Revolution had widened the gap between rich and poor, and for the women of Whitechapel, life was often a matter of survival. Many turned to sex work to afford a bed in a doss house for the night. These women were vulnerable, invisible to most of society, and one by one, someone began hunting them. Mary Ann Nichols was the first. On August 31, 1888, her body was found in Bucks Row. Her throat had been slashed twice, nearly to the spine, and her abdomen savagely mutilated. Just 8 days later, Annie Chapman was discovered behind 29 Hanbury Street, mutilated in a similar fashion, her uterus removed. Then came Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, both killed on the same night, September 30th. Eddowes' face was disfigured, her kidney removed, and a portion of her earlobe taken. The fifth and final canonical victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was found in her room on November 9th. Her body was nearly unrecognizable, dismembered, eviscerated, and grotesquely posed. These weren't random killings. These were cold, calculated murders carried out with anatomical knowledge, suggesting the killer may have had medical or surgical training. But back then, forensic science was in its infancy, and investigators were left with little more than guesswork and gut instinct. The city spiraled into panic. Newspapers fed the frenzy with lurid headlines. Letters flooded in, many claiming to be from the killer himself. One stood out, signed Jack the Ripper, and the name stuck. Scotland Yard interrogated countless suspects, from butchers to surgeons to royalty. Witnesses were unreliable. The streets were chaotic, and the killer vanished as suddenly as he appeared. Fast forward to the 21st century. Cold case investigators, true crime enthusiasts, and forensic experts began re-examining the evidence with modern tools. One breakthrough came from a silk shawl allegedly found near Catherine Eddowes' body. It had been preserved by a police officer's descendant and later tested using mitochondrial DNA. The results pointed to a name that has long been in the suspect pool but was never definitively linked: Aaron Kosminski. A Polish-Jewish immigrant who lived in Whitechapel at the time of the murders, Kosminski suffered from severe mental illness and was later committed to an asylum. The DNA match on the shawl came from a direct female descendant of Eddowes and a relative of Kosminski's family. For many, it was the missing piece of the puzzle. But the test, while compelling, wasn't without controversy. Critics argued about contamination, chain of custody, and the validity of using mitochondrial DNA, which is shared across maternal lines. Still, it was more than had ever existed before, a genetic fingerprint from the very heart of the crime scene. Aaron Kosminski wasn't a new name. He had been considered by police at the time, even placed under surveillance. But no charges were brought. The witnesses either refused to testify or couldn't confirm their stories. One surviving police memo noted that the authorities were certain he was the killer, but without proof, they had no choice but to let him go. Kosminski died in an asylum in 1919, tormented by hallucinations and refusing food. If he truly was the Ripper, the madness that fueled the killings may have also consumed him from within. But other suspects have haunted the case for generations. Montague John Druitt, a barrister and teacher who died by suicide shortly after the last murder, was suspected by a senior officer who believed the killings stopped because Druitt was dead. Then there was Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria, rumored to be involved in a royal conspiracy to silence prostitutes who knew too much. Another theory accused painter Walter Sickert, whose macabre artworks and obsession with the Ripper case raised eyebrows. Each theory brought its own intrigue, but none came with hard evidence, until now. What makes the recent DNA findings so compelling is the corroboration between physical evidence and historical context. Kosminski lived just streets away from where the victims were found. He had a documented hatred of women, delusions, and violent tendencies. A surviving memo from Assistant Commissioner Sir Robert Anderson named a Polish Jew as the prime suspect, believed by both Anderson and Chief Inspector Donald Swanson to be Kosminski. The pieces begin to fit. But does it mean the case is finally solved? Let's examine the psychological profile. Jack the Ripper wasn't just a killer, he was a predator with a specific ritual. The mutilations suggested rage, control, and symbolism. The removal of organs hinted at a fascination with anatomy, or perhaps trophy-taking behavior. If Kosminski suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, as believed, could the killings have been a manifestation of his delusions? Did he view the women as embodiments of some internal torment? The mind of the Ripper was not just evil, it was fractured, obsessed, methodical. Understanding this psychology helps explain why the murders were both chaotic and precise. They were not crimes of opportunity. They were acts of ritualized violence. But the public reaction at the time was just as telling. Victorian society was gripped with fear. Women were terrified to walk the streets. Immigrants were scapegoated. The press ran wild with speculation. The Ripper had not only butchered women, he had fractured the trust of an entire city. And now, more than a century later, his legacy endures in every cold case file, every serial killer profile, every true crime documentary. The name Jack the Ripper still carries a weight that modern killers can only emulate. One twist in the story came recently when an independent forensic genealogist used historical records, ancestry databases, and advanced software to trace a potential familial line for Kosminski. Cross-referencing birth and marriage records with genetic markers from the Shaw test, the genealogist found a striking match: descendants of Kosminski's sister living today. Their DNA samples added weight to the existing evidence. Meanwhile, a long-lost journal surfaced, believed to belong to a Scotland Yard inspector who had suppressed evidence due to public pressure and anti-Semitic tensions at the time. If true, it would explain why Kosminski was never arrested. It would also mean that authorities really knew, who Jack the Ripper was, but buried it to avoid inflaming riots in a fragile, divided city. In the most exciting moment of this decades-long mystery, a private museum curator uncovered a preserved blood sample from an unrelated crime scene, stored in the same facility that had held the Eddowes shawl. Using STR, short tandem repeat, testing, and a more advanced forensic tool known as SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism, sequencing, experts were able to extract a partial nuclear DNA profile. When compared to the Kosminski family line, the match was not just close, it was significant enough to say that Kosminski could not be excluded as the source of the sample. In legal terms, that's not a conviction, but in the world of historical cold cases, it's as close to a fingerprint as we've ever had. So, could Aaron Kosminski truly have been Jack the Ripper? The evidence says yes. The DNA, the psychological profile, the eyewitness accounts, and even the confession from an asylum doctor all point in one direction. But is it enough to declare the case closed? Maybe not officially. Critics will continue to question the reliability of 130-year-old evidence. Others will say that mitochondrial DNA isn't specific enough. And then there are those who simply don't want the mystery to end. After all, Jack the Ripper has become more than a murder. He's become a symbol of the unknown, the unknowable. Solving him means ending the myth. And some people aren't ready to let go. But for others, especially the descendants of the victims, the recent discoveries bring a sense of peace. Closure. A long overdue reckoning. And for historians, criminologists, and true crime fans, it's a powerful reminder that no mystery is ever truly unsolvable. Not with time, not with science, and not with the relentless pursuit of truth. In summary, the identity of Jack the Ripper may finally be within reach. Through new DNA evidence, genealogical research, and forensic breakthroughs, we are closer than ever to unmasking the man behind history's most infamous killing spree. The case continues to evolve, and every new discovery reshapes how we view this dark chapter. But the legacy of the Ripper will always linger, because sometimes the greatest horror isn't in the crime itself, but in the silence that follows. If you found this exploration of Jack the Ripper intriguing, don't forget to check out our other videos on true crime, cold cases, and historical mysteries. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into the world's most chilling unsolved crimes. And tell us in the comments, do you think Jack the Ripper was finally exposed, or is there still more to uncover? This is CrimeBot Chronicles, and the truth is out there, waiting in the shadows.